Hello, fellow scientists, and welcome to another edition of Photoshop for the Scientist. Got a really cool lesson for you today, which I think you'll be quite surprised what we're capable of here inside Photoshop. But first, there's a couple of things to note. The first is that this is an advanced lesson, so I might be sort of glossing over a few things or speeding through some things. And if I'm going too quickly in some places, I'm sorry about that. But hopefully you can look back in some of my earlier videos once I get around to making them. Where I should explain everything we need to know to get through this video. And secondly, some of the tools that we're using in this video are you'll be needing either Photoshop Extended if you have, for instance, Photoshop CS3 or 4 or 5 or 6 even. But if you have Photoshop CC, these tools come baked right in, so you should be all ready to go. So let's get to it. Now what we're looking at here is an image I took a couple of years ago of some BRDU staining, and in essence what we want to do is count the number of brown cells here, the number of proliferating cells compared to the total number of cells, so we can figure out the percentage of cell proliferation. Now when I first did this, or when I actually did this experiment a number of years ago, I remember sitting in my office sort of clicking through each cell and counting in my head one at a time like a real noob, and it took forever, especially when I had to go through hundreds of these images. So I was really happy to develop this technique, albeit many years later, because it can take down the analysis of your image down to maybe a minute or maybe even less than that, and should let you plow through your data pretty quickly. So if we were to get into it now, what we want to do is go to the Channels tab in your Layers menu here, in Layers panel here, and you can see that your RGB image is separated into 3 channels, red, green, and blue, each of which have varying degrees of contrast based on the color information of the image. And so what we want to do is take 2 of these channels. Ideally, we want to find the channels that have the greatest difference in contrast, which in this case looks like red and blue to me. Green is almost there, but blue is a bit darker, so we'll use red and blue. And we're going to use the calculations tool, which is something that you've probably never used before, and it's a bit of an abstruse tool to use, and frankly in some ways it's still a bit of a black box to me as well. But if we open it up, we can see this dialog box, and basically we've got source 1 and source 2, and that's going to be our 2 channels. So in source 1 we'll say red, and in source 2 we'll say blue. And in the next panel here we choose the blending option. So you've got a whole list here. I think that's falling off the screen, so let's top it up a bit. You've got a whole list that you can play around with, but basically add and subtract are going to be the ones you use most often, I think, or at least what I use most often. And in this case we'll use add, and when we choose add, sort of the really quick and dirty explanation is that what we're doing is taking the red channel, and to that we're adding all of the luminance information from the blue channel. So everywhere, every pixel, every luminance level, anywhere from 0 to 1, 0 being black, 1 being white, from the blue channel is added to every pixel, every corresponding pixel on the red channel. And so you can see any of this white area, the pixels are have a value of 1 or greater, and anywhere it's black, it's 0 or less than 0, and anything gray is in between. So yes, we're basically trying to isolate out these darker nuclei. Opacity refers to the opacity of the top channel, so if we take that down to 0, for example, we're left with just the blue channel, but that doesn't really do us any good, so we'll put it back to 100. Offset is basically adding luminance information to the image, so if you bring it up, you're going to be adding white. If you bring it down, you're going to be adding black. And scale, well, to be honest, I don't really know what scale does, so we're just going to leave it at the default of 1. So let's go ahead and click OK. I'm happy with this, how it looks for now, and I'll show you why. And this creates a new channel, which we can call BRDU positive, just to keep ourselves organized. And what we want to do is convert this to a completely black and white image, which is to say no gray at all. So for that we use the threshold command, which is under image adjustments. And for this I'll take it all the way to 255 and kind of just back it off until some of the junk kind of fades out, which to me this looks pretty decent, so we'll say OK. And I want to tidy this up even more, so what I usually do is go to Filter and go to Noise and then choose Median. And this is another thing I'll sort of play around with, sort of bump it up sort of 1 pixel at a time for radius. But for this image I found that 10 works pretty well. And so we'll say OK. And now we have our selection here. And you'll see the magic in that when I click the RGB eyeball to turn it back on, we've selected essentially all of the brownish proliferating nuclei. And so what I'll usually do is give it a quick once over just by eye. And I can see that in some cases there are some false positives, so I'll take my pencil tool and with my pencil set to white I'll just color them out, maybe here and here, maybe this guy, this guy, this guy, maybe this one. I normally don't spend a ton of time. In some cases you'll see some cells are fused, so I'll split them up just by drawing a line between them. They don't have to be circular or anything as long as they're individual. But for the interest of time we'll say that that's good enough for now. And so going back to our, maybe I bet you that little one isn't, sorry. Going back to our BRDU channel here, what we want to do is take the Magic Wand tool and just select any one of these black spots so that they're all selected. And now if we're going to choose a second tool that you might not be fully aware of, and that's the measurement log. So mirror my counts from last time, so spoiler alert. Let's get rid of those. But so inside measurement log there's a little drop down menu here, and first of all you want to make sure that you're going to be able to count the cells, so go to select data points and choose custom, and anything could be labeled here, but really all we're interested in today is the count checkbox. So make sure that's selected, you say OK, and then all you need to do is hit record measurements, and you see that there's 85. So I mean it's a little different than what I had there before because I spent a little less time refining my image today, but you know it's it should do for now, and when you're doing it you'll spend a little more time I think to make sure that everything's in the right place. So getting back, I'll show you now how to, if we double click this we can minimize it, but I'll show you how to count all the cells so that in addition, or we can find the percentage. And it's really easy because we're going to be doing the exact same thing. So we'll go up to image, we'll say calculations, choose the red channel and the blue channel, but this time we're going to be using the offset to add some black back into this image and to try to pull out those purpley nuclei. And so again this is something that I'll do by eye, but for this particular image I found that value of -100 seems to work pretty well. So we'll say OK. Again, we'll go up to adjustments and go to threshold. Again, I'll go all the way to 255 and sort of slide it back. And yeah, we'll say that looks good. We'll say filter median. It's on the top of the list here to use the exact same settings, which was a radius of 10, if you remember from before. We'll use that again. That drops out all of the little, all the pixels we don't really want. And we'll go back to the RGB channel and look at that, all of the nuclei are selected, and man, that just makes me so happy every time. So again, I'll go back, take my pencil tool, if I find some fused cells I'll try to break them apart, if I find some sort of stray pixels on their own I'll erase them, but actually you know what, this looks pretty good to me. Maybe I'll split that guy up there. Yeah, great. So we'll undo or close the visibility there. Again, we'll use the Magic Wand tool by clicking W. Select all of these again. There's some there, so let's go back and split that up. Yeah, that'll do. Okay, so back W for the Magic Wand. Click the black spots. Double-click measurement log to open it. Hit record measurements, and 126. So there you have it. That's all of your cells. And so it's worth noting that once you get all of your measurements done and you have a big list of all of your data, if you go to this drop down menu again and say select all, and then what you can do is say export selected, and save it as a tab delimited, and then you can open up in Excel or whatever program you want to analyze your data, which I'll just cancel out of that for now. So I think that pretty much does it. I know I went kind of fast today, but I think once you sort of go through it on your own and play around with some of these commands you might not have been totally familiar with before, you should get a hang of it no problem. Hopefully in a future video, I can't remember if I had mentioned this before or not, but I'll show you we can program all of this into an action, which should make things even quicker. But for now, I think we'll call it a day, and remember, you worked really hard to get that data of yours, so why not take the time to work a little harder and make sure that it looks amazing. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.